Today, I am going to be covering the item counter that I designed for my bakery over on Rotten Block. Now, there are four mechanisms that make up this system. We have the payment mechanism at the top, the queuing mechanism, the payment retrieval system, and then the item counter mechanism, which is made up of two parts, the clock and then the reset line. To start off with, we have the payment mechanism here, which is basically just an item filter with a decorated pot. Now, the pot has a single slot that can hold up to 64 items, and we've programmed the system so that it will only accept diamonds, so we can't put anything else into these pots. And since the contents of the pot here is compared to the contents of the pot back here, the contents of the pot up front needs to either be equal to or exceed the contents of this pot back here. So once we've put a diamond in, the diamond will get pulled out by the hopper below, and we can spam as many diamonds into the system as we want. Now, since we can spam diamonds into the pot up there, we need a system to protect the rest of the item counter below from the spam. So now, if I spam a bunch of diamonds into the pot, you will see that a bunch of diamonds here, they get stuck, but one diamond was let through. And then back here is the actual item counter. Now, we have 8 items already inside of this top dropper, and once we activate the clock that's here, it's going to cycle through the number of items here until this top dropper is empty. And each cycle from the clock will correspond with a pulse here at this torch. And that will push stone from this dropper into the barrel over here. So once I put a diamond through, the clock should start, and we should see 8 pulses. Cool. We have 8 items here in this barrel. And then once this top dropper is empty, we need a reset mechanism that pushes all the contents from the bottom dropper back up into the top dropper. And this is when it gets a little funky. So we're going to come back a little bit, and we're going to talk about a little technique I'm using here. So we're going to get rid of all that, get rid of that frame. And so normally when you see a configuration like this, you know that the comparator here is going to turn on when this comparator turns on. But when I put an item frame here and update the comparator back here, it no longer turns on. And we can basically put as many items as we want into this system, and this comparator still is not going to turn on. So once we fill the rest of the shulker box, that comparator is going to turn on. So this is a very compact way of checking for a power level 15. So like a storage block that is completely full, that will give off a power level of 15. It could also read from a torch, a lever, whatever. Like, whatever container you have here. So I set up this little demonstration here, just a little piece from the rest of the system over there. So if we look at this top dropper, we see there are 3 items here. There's nothing in this bottom dropper. So this comparator at the top is on. This holds this torch off. But as soon as I start moving items into this bottom dropper, you can see these bottom comparators turn on. And since I have an item frame here, this comparator on the back doesn't come on. And the only time this comparator is going to turn on is when this torch turns on, bringing this power level at this redstone dust here, this power level up to 15. So 2 more items, and then 1 more item. See the torch turn on because this top dropper is empty. This redstone dust is now at 15. It turns on this comparator, and that turns on this redstone dust down here. Now, the redstone dust here has always been on because this comparator line has always been on, or has been on since content has been in this bottom dropper. And as we move content out of this bottom dropper back up into the top dropper, that redstone eventually turns off. And so we're using that little technique to actually activate this piston here. This is what activates the observer clock. So as soon as I start moving items into this bottom dropper, these comparators will turn on, turning on this redstone dust. Now, this dust isn't doing anything yet. It won't do anything until this top dropper is completely empty, which will turn that torch on, raising the power level here at this dust up to 15, turning this comparator on, turning this dust on, activating the piston, activating the observer clock. But as soon as items start moving back in to this top dropper from the bottom dropper, this torch is going to turn back off, turning that dust off, turning the piston off. But because this redstone dust has always been on, it will be powering the piston head, locking it. So that way, the observer clock can remain active until this bottom dropper is empty. And we can see that happen when I move this last item from the top dropper into the bottom dropper. Pretty cool. Then the last thing we had to add to the system was the payment retrieval. So again, we can spam as many diamonds into the system, or as long as there's space for the diamonds, we can spam them in. And there's going to be a queue here. There's going to be a diamond here. So once the count is done, it's actually going to activate this minecart there. It's going to retrieve the diamond, allowing the next diamond through. And this is how we check for multiple payments. Now, a couple bits of information about the item counter. We can count between 1 and 576, 576 being 9 stacks of items, which is what both droppers can hold at most. There is also a slight flaw with the payment retrieval system. I cannot program this system with a single item, otherwise the payment retrieval system will not function. I do have a fix for the oversight, but it makes the entire system redundant and kind of pointless, so it's it's really not worth doing. Now, I hope you enjoyed this overview of my item counter design, and if you did, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. See you.